The Cleveland Cavaliers select Evan Mobley.
Has been a historical franchise in this league for years.
We have a trade to announce. The Boston Celtics select Jason Tatum.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. Once again, getting closer to that NBA trade deadline. We've got a lot of news to get through today, and then we're also going to talk buyers and sellers while I keep my fingers crossed and hope that my power stays on for the entire time. I've been dealing with power outages today, so Keith, hopefully we can get through this without any craziness happening.
Yeah, no doubt. Just to make 90% of the country unhappy, it is a beautiful 80 degrees here in Orlando, Florida today.
And here I've got frozen tree branches falling on power lines around me, and you're hanging out in shorts and sandals. Whatever.
Yep, that's exactly. I can't see the bottom half, but I've got shorts and sandals on for sure.
I called it. All right, let's get into the news here. Start off, Lance Stephenson. You know, we've talked about this a bit, that there were going to be some guys who made the most of their opportunities due to hardship situations where they get signed on, and Lance Stephenson was one of those guys with the Pacers. Sounds like he's going to stick with them for the remainder of the season.
Yeah, 4 10-day contracts, 2 hardship and 2 standard. And then I believe he did 1 or 2 with the Atlanta Hawks, but now he's back to stick with the Pacers. They are extremely shorthanded still. They're still a whole bunch of different guys. Last night was just a mess against the Orlando Magic. Isaiah Jackson was their only healthy guy above 6'6", and he got hurt 22 seconds into the game contesting a jump shot, and they played the rest of the game like I was going to say like a mid-major college team, but their mid-major college teams are bigger, and then they lost at the end of the game to the Magic. So but Lance Stephenson going to stick around. Cool story, right? That made it back after this long out of the league, went the G League route, did all that stuff. So yeah, as you said, a couple guys made it.
Yep. Welcome back, Lance. The 3 guitar returns. The Cavs get a disabled player exception for Colin Sexton. Again, we know that he was going to be out for the season, although I did see some talk that maybe there was a chance he could be back around playoff time. But regardless, they will get the opportunity to go sign somebody else. It's not going to be a ton of money, but maybe something that they could use at some point. Yeah,
about 3.2 million is this DPE amount for Colin Sexton, that they're going to get 3.17 if we want to get super technical about it, half of his salary, and they were granted this in recent days, so this will help them maybe going into the trade deadline. Maybe they use that for a small acquisition. We've already talked about what a disabled player exception is and isn't on prior shows, and all this means is that an independent doctor said it's more likely than not that Colin Sexton won't play the rest of the season. So that doesn't mean he's definitely out, but that's what the DP means.
The Cavs are also mentioned as the team that's interested in trading for, guess who? Jerami Grant. Pretty much every team is interested in trading for Jerami Grant right now, as well as Harrison Barnes. Not a surprise. Again, most of the teams that are out there as buyers have at least checked in on Jerami Grant, on his availability, and Harrison Barnes is another name. We talked about him yesterday as a guy that can fit pretty much anywhere. He can fit alongside a lot of different kinds of lineups, so not a surprise to see his name pop up there either, but good to hear that the Cavs are looking to be buyers and looking to add pieces. This has been a great season for them, and they could really make some noise in the playoffs, particularly if they get a little boost here at the trade deadline.
Yeah, probably more likely to go guard than forward for them. But the Utah Jazz also, Kevin O'Connor of The Ringer, in one of his pieces this week, said that they're looking at forwards who can defend like wings. So Barnes and Grant kind of fit there. And then Joe Ingles' expiring contract would be the salary match in such a trade. So, we'll see, where this goes. We're a week out from the deadline, and we're talking a little bit before. It's been very quiet, but sometimes that means things are getting done versus things are getting, just kind of batted around and leaked out there. So speaking of things getting it done, Portland, let's see, right? We've kind of been all over the gamut with these guys. Are they going to tear it down? Are they going to start over? All this in Portland, it's their GM, Joe Cronin, replaced Neil O'Shea after he was fired mid-season. He basically said is, hey, we have to take a big picture approach to things, but knowing it's, still the small picture still matters, that he is basically, he was asked, did they think it is time for an overhaul or reset? And he said, we are looking at all different scenarios. Reset is a big word. We're too competitive to want to do that. So it depends on what you mean by reset. Then was asked, what if reset means long-term rebuild? No, I don't think we have the appetite to tear it all the way down. We have too many good players and too many ways to get better without taking too big of a step back. So that says to me they are not doing full scale fire sale. Maybe still Yusuf Nurkic or Robert Covington or somebody like that gets moved, but definitely I don't think we're going to see Damian Lillard, maybe not even CJ McCollum, unless they return somebody who can play right away for Portland.
Yeah, I mean, that was my initial thought too, was as much as people want to say, oh, but they really need to rebuild. Well, but think about what that means. If you say the word rebuild, that means goodbye Damian Lillard, right? And I totally understand why they would not be ready to go over that hurdle just yet. So I understand it from that perspective, saying we're not going to necessarily rebuild. I don't know if I agree that they've got the pieces to really go out there and change things on the fly and jump back up to the top of the Western Conference or anything. But going that route, if you say we're going to do a long-term rebuild, that's the nuclear option. That means Damian Lillard is gone. That means everybody is going. And I can understand the hesitation from the Portland side to go that far with this.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Want to get into the long-awaited Western Conference buyers and sellers? I think we're through the news. We told you it's a light news today, so let's get into it. We'll go in alphabetical order. So I'll hit them because I know you're going to be looking at the standings here. And if you're interested in my longer thoughts, you can read over at Spot Track. I have an article up on the Western Conference buyers and sellers. But at the top of the West, alphabetically, closer to the top in the standings, the Dallas Mavericks, alphabetically by city. Let me state that too. I think the Mavericks are in a really tricky spot because I think they'd like to be buyers, but they don't have a whole lot to buy with. Tim Hardaway Jr. being hurt, that's tricky. Dwight Powell could get sent out. I guess they could send another pick out if they really wanted to, but they still owe a pick from the Kristaps Porzingis trade a few years back. So that's the hard part. And then Jalen Brunson and Dorian Finney-Smith, their team, the guys that teams are interested in all over the place, but it sounds like it's starting to turn towards Dallas just wants to keep them and re-sign them and figure out all the rest of it later. So we may end up seeing the Mavs kind of more or less sit this one out and hope for some better health.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I think the Mavs are buyers if the opportunity is there. Otherwise, they're sitting out. They're not sellers. They're definitely not going to be sellers here. They're either going to buy or they're going to do nothing, because you look at where they are in the standings, sitting in the 5 seed, could potentially, depending on what happens with Utah, could potentially try to make a push for that 4 seed now that Utah has slipped quite a bit. I think that the Mavs are in an interesting position. They don't have to buy. I don't know that they have the assets to buy, but they're definitely not going to sell.
That's it. Denver Nuggets, I think clearly they're neither. They're definitely not selling. I think their big move, I put air quotes around that, was to go get Bryn Forbes, who shored up a weakness with shooting, and boy, has he shot the heck out. It's getting to Denver. But their big acquisitions are going to be Jamal Murray and maybe Michael Porter Jr. That's going to be where it is, and those are not obviously trade acquisitions, but they're definitely going to get Murray back probably sometime within the next month-ish, maybe early to mid-March, and then we'll see if Porter can get back or not. They did get a disabled player exception, so that means that independent medical review thought Porter wouldn't get back, but if he does, hey, bonus there. But I think Denver, maybe a move around the edges, just to kind of shore up the rotation. But I think they'll probably be relatively quiet and just run with what they have and hope those guys will come back and give them a boost.
Absolutely. Agreed. And look, I mean, Denver set up their team specifically to try to contend with this group. They've paid a lot of guys, but that also means there's some limited flexibility moving forward for them. But again, they're kind of similar to Dallas in that they'll be a buyer if the right deal is sitting there for them, but most likely they're probably not doing much.
Yep. Golden State Warriors, this one is quick.
Mhm.
They're probably doing nothing. They're probably going to sit this out entirely. They're not going to trade James Wiseman. His value is as low as it could possibly get. He hasn't returned yet. So that's just not a move. That your hope there is get him back, get him, at least showing something the rest of the way, and then maybe you do something this offseason with him as the centerpiece of a trade. But the other thing is they just don't have a ton of needs, and they don't have any easy kind of cuts that they want to move on their roster of get rid of this guy or get rid of that guy. So I think what you see is what you get with the Warriors, that they're going to sit this thing out, maybe buyout season, but I don't even think that happens for them just because I think they like their guys 1 through 15 right now.
We're making the West sound so boring. Like the first three teams, we're like, yeah, they're not doing
We'll get
anything.
there.
They're
We'll get
sitting out. but I agree on the
coming.
Warriors 100%.
Yeah. The Houston Rockets. Now, these guys are sellers, but what are you selling? John Wall, sure. Hey, Lakers, you're throwing a first round pick with Russell Westbrook. John Wall is yours. My guess is I've said this is either takes to the offseason, or we'll see if they can do a Blake Griffin type situation where trade deadline passes and Wall is like, yo, what, I'll get back some money because I want to play. We'll see. But then DJ Augustin, definitely they would move him if they need to. We've talked it over and over and over again. Who needs a point guard? There's a handful of teams. But guys like Dennis Schroeder, maybe Spencer Dinwiddie, those are probably better options for teams that are looking for point guards. Daniel Tice, very available. Let's see what happens with Christian Wood. I think they'd have to be kind of bowled over by an offer to move Wood. They actually talked in the last couple games about they want to get more minutes with him and Alperen Sengun together to see what that looks like with those two. So that kind of leaves Eric Gordon. So maybe, but they're asking for a first round pick. And we kind of laughed about it on a recent show of like, that seems like it's crazy, but the way Gordon has played, that's really not all that, insane of an ask, especially if it's coming from a team whose pick's going to be in the 20s.
Absolutely. Makes all the sense in the world for them to try to move Gordon right now if they can. Again, this is probably the highest his value is going to be. So you do what you can do. If they can get the first, great. They'll take it, run with it. I kind of feel like it's going to be more like a heavily protected first if it's a first. Maybe it'll be a first that really is 2 seconds, something like that is what they'll wind up getting. But I do think that they have reason to make a move with Eric Gordon right now. So wouldn't be surprised, as much as they've pushed back, if we do see him with a new destination come the trade deadline.
Yep. LA Clippers probably would have been buyers if Paul George hadn't gotten hurt, because you would have been looking at it and saying, all right, Paul George and then Kawhi Leonard and go from there. But we're in a spot where now it's probably likely they'll just kind of set this one out. We'll retool a little bit this offseason around George and Leonard, see what it looks like. If anything, I would keep an eye on maybe they move off a guy like Eric Bledsoe in a salary clearing move. Maybe you could talk to Oklahoma City or Orlando that are sitting on big trade exceptions and see if they'd get interested in taking on his contract for something, because that would save them major luxury tax payments. And yeah, they have the richest owner in maybe sports, at least in the NBA, but I think he still has a limit too of how much he wants to pay for a team that's going to be in the play.
So probably a minor move here, if anything, from the Clippers at this point. And we'll see on Paul George, Kawhi Leonard. It feels like it all kind of hinges on Paul George. Like if Paul George doesn't wind up coming back, then Kawhi Leonard probably doesn't come back either. At least that's kind of the sense I'm getting, right?
Yeah, I'm complete agreement with you. I don't think there's no reason to bring Kawhi back if Paul George isn't going to play. You're just not a contender at that point. If you could get them both back, you could say, all right, get through the play-in, and we like our chances against Phoenix, Golden State, Memphis, even, if we could, land in that spot or something like that. So yeah, the Los Angeles Lakers, I think you'll like this. I said they're kind of like when you had the toy catalog at Christmas and you were like, man, I want all this stuff, and you circled all of it, but you knew like Santa had to come through with a miracle to get it. Well, I mean, that's kind of where Lakers are at, right? They've offered the package, the THT non-pick package, to basically everybody, and no one has jumped at it yet. I do think if they get a little more serious with that pick and maybe take protections off it and say, all right, we'll just send that pick, completely unencumbered, or if they could do something with New Orleans where, hey, we're going to send you a little something, free up, and you take the 2025 or 2024 pick, and then that frees them up to trade 2026. Then they could trade two. Let's see, maybe that gets something there. But yeah, and then I wrote, just forget a Russell Westbrook trade. That's not happening. If that happens, it's going to happen this summer. But we kind of know where things stand.
Yeah, absolutely. I've talked about it a ton, obviously, over on Lakers Nation. Their trade package doesn't have a ton of value around the NBA. THT has not been good this season. Kendrick Nunn has not played at all, so hard to give a lot of value for that. Really, we're talking about the pick, and then you've got matching salaries in there to try to work with. It'll be an uphill battle. We know the Lakers would like to make a move, but I've been predicting all along, most likely what we see out of the Lakers is something to free up a roster spot where they pay with cash, with a second round pick, get somebody to take on a DeAndre Jordan, Kent Bazemore, somebody like that. OKC, their ears are burning right now. Somebody would get paid to do something like that. That's a very minor move, but that's the most likely thing we see the Lakers do at the trade deadline, but it won't be for a lack of trying.
Yep, absolutely. All right, let's move on. Memphis Grizzlies. Interesting spot for the Grizzlies. They're way better than I think anybody thought, except for maybe folks in Memphis. Also, as an aside, I love that they are talking trash to everybody and letting them know if you don't like it, stop them. Maybe beat them. Then they won't talk as much. Like I think it's great. The NBA's best when there's guys who are talking junk and embracing that role and those kind of things. And I thought that was, phenomenal when John Morant said, you bumped us off national TV, well, what happened to the team you put on instead of us? And they stomped the Knicks. So, but trade deadline wise, I don't know that we see a whole heck of a lot. I think they're going to be cautious. They've been fairly cautious. Yeah, absolutely should. They've been cautious in this build up the whole way. I think they're going to continue to kind of take their time here, see what they got. I think they're really looking forward to have a real playoff run, and that'll help us know what do we need going forward, around John Morant, around Jaren Jackson Jr. Well, what are our real needs? And then they can address those things going forward. But they've got a couple interesting expiring players, Kyle Anderson, Tyus Jones, Jarrett Culver, despite reports that teams are interested. It's more of a salary match than anything. So let's see. But I think they'll probably be pretty quiet.
You can derail a team's trajectory if you're too hesitant to make a deal, if you overvalue your own assets, if you don't take the opportunities in front of you. But you can also derail your trajectory if you are overly aggressive and you're too eager to make a move and say, okay, we're going to contend now. You can hurt yourself in the long run if you don't just kind of allow that build up to happen organically. So I do think the Memphis Grizzlies, if they are cautious, that is the correct approach. If something that makes sense falls in their laps, cool, you go for it. But otherwise, I think they've got something really good going, and you don't want to mess too much with that in either direction because that can lead to disaster.
If we're in this spot a year from now, gotta go. Then it's time to go. Now it's time to start pushing it, because otherwise you wait so long, and then what if it doesn't come, right? Then there. But right now, you'll go. Yep. All right, let's jump to Minnesota. They're trying, man. They are trying to buy. They've been in on Ben Simmons all year. They've been dangling Malik Beasley, Taurean Prince. There's been some Patrick Beverley rumors out there that they want defensive help. They want forward help. They want someone with shooting range. They wouldn't mind a backup point guard to come in. But I think they're going to do something, because they've got a bunch of movable contracts that are coming up and expiring. But I think they're going to be there. My guess is they're going to keep calling Philly like that annoying guy in your fantasy league. It's like, dude, you have nothing I want. And it's like, yeah, but you still don't want to trade, that really good running back, for my, 4 good wide receivers that are kind of okay, but have injury issues. That's what they feel like to me. But then barring that, and I don't think that's going to be the direction it goes, despite the dream, I think Simmons would be perfect in Minnesota. I think that they'll get something done just because of the number of players on expiring deals. It's too good of an opportunity to miss up, or to miss out on, to mess up getting pushed up into the playoff.
And of course, we've talked about this. It's been a while since they've been in the playoff mix, and now they've got a chance to really solidify their status here. So they've got all the motivation in the world to make a move. so much motivation that it would be surprising if they didn't make a move. So I do expect them to do something. Exactly what that is, though, is hard to see because, like you said, it doesn't quite feel like they've got enough to interest Philly for Ben Simmons. Can they get in on Jerami Grant? Can they get in on a Harrison Barnes? Somebody like that. I do think they'll pull something off. It's just hard to tell at this point exactly what that is.
Yep, I completely agree. All right, New Orleans Pelicans. I don't know what to make of these guys. They are hard to peg because you look at it and you say, they should probably be looking to see what they could do for Satoransky, maybe Josh Hart. His contract was always designed to be very, very tradable. But then you hear like, hey, they're interested in CJ McCollum. They're interested in other players, and we'll see. I mean, they're not completely out of it. They are a game and a half behind Portland. So if Portland maybe takes a side step, we're going to get to them in just a second, but we just talked about they're not going to tear it down. So Portland's probably going to hang right around 10 for the rest of the way. So maybe New Orleans runs them down and catches them, and maybe that's worth investing in. And all right, hey, we got this guy. My guess is if they do anything, it's got to be someone like McCollum who would be there for the rest of this year for help, but then would also be there for the next couple of years, because then you can say and maybe convince yourself, all right, we made a little bit of a run and we got to look at what it looks like. Now we get to add Zion to this next
Absolutely.
season.
That's it exactly. They have to be careful that whatever move they make, it's not just a 1-year band-aid move. It's okay, let's make a move if we can find a guy that we think can be here for the next 3-4 seasons or whatever. Then that's the type of move that they should be looking at. I don't know if you push all in to try to win right now, because realistically, if you jump up to the 10 seed, what good does that really do you in the long run? Does that really help you out that much? Not if you're sacrificing assets in order to get there. But if you can get something that you think can help you not just this season, but in future seasons as well, then you go ahead and you consider it.
Absolutely spot on. Yep. Then let's jump to the Oklahoma City Thunder. We know what the situation is here. They are going to be, assuming their trade exceptions expire, which is to happen. They're going to be $30 million under the salary cap here. So they're going to be everybody's third team in, fourth team in. Hey, like you mentioned, the Lakers looking to dump a salary. You mentioned OKC, will be there with waiting arms. Anybody who needs to move off money to lower or get out of the tax entirely, their first call is probably going to Sam Presti. So we know where they're at. I don't expect them to do anything as far as moving any of their good players like Kenrich Williams or anybody like that. It just doesn't make sense. But we know what the deal is with the Thunder.
Oh yeah, I fully expect if you call Sam Presti, let's say Sam Presti's in the middle of a meeting and you call him up and you get his voicemail. His voicemail probably goes something like, "Hey, this is Sam. Sorry I couldn't get to your call. Let me know how many picks you can give me and I'll get back to you." That's
yep.
That's what they want is picks. And so I think they will get some more picks. I think that's going to happen. But yeah, I wouldn't expect them to buy or anything like that. They'll be a seller, and they're looking to get picks. So they'll sell cap room if they can.
Yep, absolutely. All right, Phoenix Suns. They're buyers, but they don't need a whole lot. They're one of the deeper teams in the league as far as quality depth goes in their 8-9 man rotation. Dario Saric, they're offering him out there if they can do anything, because that's again one of my favorite terms right now, a no production loss trade for the Suns. So we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised though if they ultimately keep Saric and they just roll with what they have.
Agreed. Yeah, they being the top seed means that you've got the ability to be choosy, and if the right thing comes along, then great, and if not, that's okay. We're still a top seed and look like the best team in the NBA right now.
Yep, absolutely. 11 straight now, I think, for them. Yeah, they're doing all right. All right, Portland. We already talked a little bit about Portland. Sounds like no full-scale teardown is coming down. Let's see what happens with CJ McCollum. The size of his contract always makes it more likely that's an off-season thing than an in-season thing. There's been buzz around Norman Powell, Larry Nance, Robert Covington, Yusuf Nurkic. Portland will get out of the tax. They're very close to being out of the tax, so that will happen. My guess is that happens in a Robert Covington trade, because I just don't think he's a long-term piece for them. them, but I don't know that we see anything beyond that. I think they move Covington, take back, the minimal amount of money that they can, and then they stay on a path to continue to do what they do while also avoiding the tax, and then maybe bigger changes this summer as they I know they don't want to use the term reset, but I'll use it, reset around Damian Lillard.
Agreed. And like you said, we already talked quite a bit of Blazers, so I don't really have a whole lot to add there other than I think Covington is a guy who might get some interest around the league. I just wouldn't be expecting like a massive return or anything like that. It'll be a moderate asset to come back for him.
I'm going to make a prediction.
Yeah.
You ready? I think where he may land may be the Lakers.
I was kind of thinking that too.
And I think maybe Kendrick Nunn goes off somewhere else. Maybe he goes to OKC or something like that, and Covington lands in the Lakers. Not a bad get for the Lakers because he's played that small ball 5 role before for Houston if they want to continue to play super small. But it just that seems like a more reasonable target than trying to get Jerami Grant or any of those other guys.
Agreed. I was actually looking at that trade yesterday. So who knows? Could end up happening, but do keep in mind the Blazers are loath to do anything with the Los Angeles Lakers. So that could end up being a factor. We'll see.
True. Yeah. All right, Sacramento. We've talked a lot about the Kings, so we don't have to spend a ton of time on this, but just the Kings are the Kings, right? They maybe they should be full scale sellers and selling off a whole bunch of stuff and keeping Tyrese Halliburton, Davion Mitchell, and building around those guys. But it sounds like they don't want to do that. It sounds like maybe Harrison Barnes, maybe Buddy Hield, Marvin Bagley. I think will get moved at some point. It's shocking that it hasn't happened yet. Let's see. But I think they're going to look different after the trade deadline, but I don't know that it's going to be major, massive, full scale rebuild or anything like that, because I just don't think they want to go that path again.
They're sellers, but it feels like they think they should be buyers. Yeah. Like, I think that's just the best way to sum up what Sacramento's got going on right now. I don't think they're good enough as is. I think they've got some pieces with some value. And if they find the right moves, then maybe they can cash those in, and maybe instead of getting trade assets, they can find or future picks or whatever, they can get some pieces that can help them kind of reshuffle things right now. But otherwise, I don't think this is a team that, as constructed, has what it takes, and they need to get what they can for some of these guys because I don't think their value is going to go up next year.
Completely agreed. You know what they are? They're my grandmother. My grandmother used to do yard sales or garage sales. I know people call them different things, different places in the country. She would do those to sell a whole bunch of stuff, to then go to other people's yard sales and garage sales to buy a whole bunch of crap to then sell at hers next year. So that's what the Sacramento Kings
That's
are.
a great analogy. That's a great one.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. This one will be super duper quick.
Yep.
The Spurs already made an in-season move, which was shocking enough that even happened as they traded Brendan Forbes away. The only other one will be Thad Young. If they're going to do anything, it'll be Thad Young. I hope they do, because get something small back for him. At least you ought to be able to pull that off, for there. But if not, he'll get bought out because he's certainly not going to be there. By the end of February, he'll be on a different team. I'll say whether it's trade or buyout, but that'll be it from the Spurs. They just don't do in-season stuff.
Yeah, that's easy. I agree.
Yep. All right, Utah Jazz. This one obviously changed with Joe Ingles going down. They had offered him up. They'd offered a down the line first round pick because they have a couple picks that they still owe that they have to convey out to other teams. Jordan Clarkson's been tossed out there, but he has not played all that well this year. The Jazz are pushing. We already talked. They're in on Jerami Grant. They're in on Harrison Barnes. They're trying to do something because they, I think, very much have the right read that we're in a tough spot here. We got to win. Otherwise, things are going to start to get a lot of questions asked. They're more expensive than they've ever been at any point. So that's also, adding to this intrigue here. So I think you're going to see the Jazz be pretty busy over the next week here as they try to really buoy that roster around Gobert and Mitchell. Nothing will happen with them clearly now. But if they get bounced early in the playoffs again, that's going to get to be real noise this going into this summer of, can you win with those two guys? Do you need to move one of those two? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think the Joe Ingles thing definitely changes what they can get out there on the market. I think that they are highly motivated to get something done, to find something, to get themselves back up to where they were, to be one of those top 3 teams in the Western Conference. For a while, they looked like they could be the team to come out of the West, and they have certainly slipped since then. The challenge with Jordan Clarkson, something I've talked about a lot, is when you have a guy who's making a career as essentially a bad shot maker, kind of a bailout, a one-man offense type of guy who you can give the ball to when everything else falls apart and say, here, go create something, is a lot of their value is tied to their field goal, their 3-point percentage, their ability to score efficiently in those situations. And that's not always a sticky stat. So if that starts to slip, their value decreases drastically with it. And that's what we're seeing from Clarkson this season, where he's shooting low 30% from 3, shooting 40% from the field. That's not quite where teams want him to be in terms of efficiency. I think he still has some value, but not as much as he would have, say, last season.
Yeah, absolutely. And that might be one where on his current deal, just keep him if you're Utah. Hope he can find the stroke again, and then you keep things moving. All right, that was your Western Conference buyers and sellers. We're a couple days later than we wanted to be, but news came up that we covered instead with that. But there you go, you got it. We're 1 week till the trade deadline, so expect any time now. Things may start coming down. I know I've got my phone notifications on and ready to go, and I am gonna let Trevor do the sign off here because I'm gonna bounce because I've got to do a radio appearance to probably talk an awful lot about Western Conference buyers and sellers.
All right, well, have fun with that, Keith. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you do subscribe right here to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel. Turn on those notifications, and don't forget to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts as well, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever. Till then, stay safe. See ya.